What up, everybody? Welcome back to Operation Moksha. As always, I'm your host, Chris Orozco, and today we're going to be talking about the idea that your emotions don't make any logical fucking sense and they were never supposed to. Now, this is important to talk about because a lot of people get into shadow integration unknowingly expecting their emotions to make logical sense. We expect everything to make logical sense. We expect ourselves to make logical sense because a lot of things in the world do, but then we apply them to emotions and it just kind of breaks down. And there's a very valid reason for why it breaks down. And also emotions have their own kind of internal logic that I'm going to explain in greater detail going forward. But before we do all that, do me a personal favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you can see all the videos that are going to be posting going forward, because we're just going to keep going deeper, keep doing cooler and cooler shit. And I want to make sure you get all the videos so you can be armed to completely take control of your life in everywhere that you want to. So let's fucking get into this shit. Why doesn't it make sense to apply logic to your emotions? And quite literally, there are two different parts of the mind that govern logic and emotions. Now, you could define this as the masculine and feminine aspects of the psyche. You could define it as left brain, right brain. You could define it as a lot of different things. I'm personally a big fan of the masculine feminine frame. For this specific example, we're just going to use logic and emotions and explain why they're different and how to ultimately bridge the gap between the two. Emotions do make sense in a logical way, but they have their own kind of logic. And if you want to have your emotions make sense, you have to understand their own internal logic and how that differs from like rational logic. But first, the reason it makes sense to kind of have these two be distinct is because in large part, your mind was programmed by a frightened child.
Oh, don't be frightened, child.
For the most part, your patterns, trauma, personality, all that sort of shit gets pretty much hardwired. And then everything that happens after that is kind of a compounding on that, building on that, sometimes a deviation, but for the most part, the foundation is more or less set. But what that means is that your personality foundation was created by a child. So consider that for a moment. Just really take the moment to consider. You are living in the most sophisticated biological computer ever created, ever conceived or imagined. The most sophisticated supercomputer in the history of everything. And it was programmed by a child. And then you just have to go live your life like that. And you have to get by as this incredibly sophisticated machine that was programmed by a child. And you just have to go about live your life and try to be happy and try to be successful and try to make things work. And those are the conditions under which you're brought into this world. It's so funny to me, but that's why you can't expect your emotions to make logical sense, because the way in which they were programmed is so absurdly and comically hilarious that like you can't take it seriously. Like your mind and reality was programmed by a child. So allow that in, allow that to kind of break you a little bit, allow you to see the absurdity of the situation that you found yourself in as a living adult human being, and the fact that you actually still see the world in large part as a frightened child. Just that's probably gonna break your heart. It's probably gonna piss you off before it becomes funny, but go through it because the humor's worth it. It's gonna be okay. Because once you see the humor in it, then you can also start to see the compassion in it, right? Because it's like, oh, wait a minute. My patterns don't make sense. And my patterns don't make sense because it's not that I'm stupid. It's not that I'm broken. It's not that there's something wrong with me. It's not like I'm this fucking counterintuitive, stupid dummy brain thing and it's all me. It's like, no, it's just how people are. We were programmed by children. And so when you really allow yourself to understand the absurdity of that, you can hopefully also allow yourself to have some compassion for that. You're like, wait a minute, I've been looking at myself as if I'm just this well-adjusted adult that should know better and should do the logical thing and should do the blah, 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 blah. But wait a minute, I've also been programmed by a child. So how could I do that? Because you also have to understand a few things about children and the way that they formulate their worldview. Again, I don't like study psychology a lot. I just kind of pay attention and make my own observations. So this is my own observation. If some other scientist or whatever made this observation as well, I don't give a fuck. Whatever. This is what I've noticed. Not only was your mind programmed by a frightened child, but it was programmed by a frightened child that had very little control over its environment. Because that's the thing you have to understand about this, is not only did a frightened child program your mind, which in and of itself is just a clusterfuck of just cosmic proportion, but also it was programmed by a frightened little child that had very little say in their environment, right? Like the logical thing to do is if somebody's disrespecting you or being mean to you or not listening to you as an adult, is have a conversation about that. Set a boundary. Say, hey, if you continue to do X, Y, Z, I'm gonna have to go over here. I don't really like the way you're talking to me, blah, 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 blah. That's the logical thing. And that may be what you expect yourself to do. However, put yourself in the position of a child who is scared and frightened, and also everything about their reality is governed by the thing they're afraid of. Like, just put yourself in that position for a minute. Being a scared, frightened child, even if it doesn't have to be that intense, right? Like, my mom didn't like abuse me physically or anything, but I knew that, like, oh shit, if I speak up against this, I'm gonna get yelled at, and I might get spanked. I might get hit or like yelled at by the thing that is the arbiter of my safety and survival on this planet Earth. Especially because my dad died when I was a kid, so my mom was all I had. So it's like, oh shit, if that thing doesn't like me, I don't eat, I don't sleep, I'm dead, I'm fucked. So you have to understand that the not only that you were programmed by a child that couldn't see into the future and had no idea the psychological repercussions and implications of decisions that it were gonna make, it had no idea it was gonna formulate a personality that you would have to live with for the rest of your life, but it did that under pretty scary circumstances in which it had no agency over its environment. You don't really get to stand up to your parents all that much and really get your way. At least most people I know don't. I certainly didn't. You definitely don't get to like negotiate with your parents. There's so many things you don't have any control over. And so you were frightened, maybe in pain, God knows whatever else, and you had no say over how your reality went. And so how could you possibly hope to create a logical, reasonable worldview under those circumstances? And again, this is just to kind of show you the absurdity of the situation that you find yourself in, and hopefully allow that absurdity to break into compassion and allowing you to understand the own internal logic of the emotions, because this is kind of what I'm getting at. I'm building the case for that, is they have their own internal set of logic. And if you apply this certain frame, it all does start to make logical sense. It's a frightened child that had no control over its environment, trying to create not solutions that would help it thrive, but helping it create solutions that would help it survive. Most of your emotional patterns are survival-based rather than helping you thrive. Because when you are a tiny little kid and everybody's bigger than you and everybody's stronger than you and you have no authority and you have no say over what's going on, the idea of thriving doesn't make sense to you. Because it's like, where are you gonna go? Like, how are you gonna thrive? Like, your environment is kind of given to you and you don't really get a whole lot of say out of it. So you just try to cope with your environment, you try to get through it, you try to survive it. And so a lot of our patterns are about coping, getting through, and surviving, not thriving, not transforming, or doing the things that us as adults know would be better. So when you take a look at that, it's like, okay, all of my emotional patterns are from a scared, frightened child that had no control over their environment, who just wanted to survive it. Then all of a sudden your emotional patterns start to make a hell of a lot more sense when you can get into the mind of somebody like that. And the more you do your integration work and allow these unconscious parts of you to communicate with you, the more that internal logic will kind of make sense, right? And here's an example that I give a lot because to me, it's just kind of the easiest to illustrate the point. And it's the idea of like pushing people away because you're afraid of rejection or abandonment. It's just easy for me to, because it's been such a big part of my life, it's just easy for me to conceptualize this one. The way the kid thinks is, wow, abandonment is so painful that I never want to feel that pain ever again. Right? An adult knows that, like, yeah, okay, abandonment's gonna happen sometimes. There's not really much you can do about that. Emotional pain comes and goes. It's a temporary experience, just like stubbing your toe. It's not that big of a deal. A well-adjusted adult would know how to deal with that. It'd be fine. But kids don't have that. Kids experience abandonment, especially if it's like rejection or abandonment or something like that from a parent. And like it puts on this like, oh, fuck, I got rejected by the thing that's supposed to love me more than anything else in the world. That must mean there's something awful with me. It just has so much more weight when you're a child, being rejected or whatever, or blamed or whatever by your parents. It's hard to conceive of the power that a parent has over a child when you're an adult. You really have to go back into your recesses and try and remember what childhood was like for you to really get a sense of just how big all that is. But it's enormous, right? Because it's like if the thing that loves you the most, the thing that you idolize, the thing that is your fucking alpha and omega, whatever, if that doesn't like you, it's like, oh shit, what does that mean about me? What is that? It creates such an unbelievably painful internal environment to be rejected by your parents or something like that. Because it's not just the rejection of one person, it's the whole context, it's the whole fucking bullshit that goes along with it. So when you understand the amount of pain and the fact that a little kid doesn't know what to do with their emotions, all they know how to do is, fuck, that sucks, get me away from this. That's the type of thing that creates a dysfunctional pattern that makes perfect sense for a child. As an adult, if you're afraid of abandonment, you're gonna be like, whoa, I'm not gonna let anyone near me. Which doesn't make any fucking sense because that's causing you to create the exact thing you don't want. Because it's like, this is where self-fulfilling prophecies come from. It's like, oh, this little kid inside of me is scared of abandonment, so let me create the exact scenarios that are gonna cause me to be abandoned so that I don't have to be abandoned. Like that's the kind of dumb shit that we're talking about here. Where as an adult, it doesn't make any fucking sense. But when you look at it from the child's perspective, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I think I'm gonna be abandoned, and I never wanna feel that feeling ever again. So let me see how safe I am. Let me act up and see if this person will abandon me. Let me test this person. Let me see where this person's at. As a kid, that kind of makes sense to do because you don't get to be like, oh, I'm just gonna walk away. All you can do is be like, how safe am I? Did I get hit? Oh, interesting, I didn't get hit. And so you just kind of push that because you're afraid, and you just kind of keep going and going and going until eventually you push the person away. Now, if you were to embrace the kind of illogical logic in that, you're like, okay, little person inside of me, you really just don't ever want to feel the pain of abandonment ever again. I get that. And pushing people away is pretty much the worst way to get that need met ever. So how about instead, I help you feel like it's okay? How about instead, I help you feel like it's okay to get abandoned sometimes because we're not kids anymore. We're the ones in control of our reality. If someone doesn't like us, it's not the same as mom or dad not liking us. It's not the same as losing our source of love and food and shelter and survival. It's not like that anymore. It used to be like that, so I understand why you're behaving this way, because you were a fucking child that had no control over their environment. So of course this illogical shit is the best thing you could come up with, because who the fuck is gonna teach you otherwise? But I'm here now. I understand that this is the best that you could do, but there's better shit now. Now, if I think someone's gonna reject me or abandon me, I can just have a conversation with them. Or I can just not invest in the people that I don't trust to be good to me. Like, there's so many lessons we can learn here, so we don't have to take this exact pattern into adulthood. But in order to have that kind of compassionate dialogue and mutual understanding, you have to understand that it's not gonna make logical sense. Because there's a lot of people that go into these kinds of dynamics expecting it to make logical sense, and then it doesn't, and they get frustrated and they judge themselves more, which just drives the pattern in deeper. It's like, of course it doesn't make sense. It's fucking terrified. It's a little baby child. Of course it's terrified. So instead of expecting it to rise to your standards, you need to kind of like open yourself and get down to its level and be like, all right, tell me why you're doing what you're doing. I know it's not gonna make logical sense, but I know it'll make sense to you from an emotional perspective, from a survival perspective, from a coping with an environment you have very little control over perspective. That's the perspective in which it'll make sense. So if I can look at you and deal with you from the frame that you're just doing the best you could with what you had, and try to understand how you saw the world and how you tried to solve these problems, and ultimately help me understand how I can create better solutions to these problems, then that part of you gets integrated. But again, if you're looking at it to make logical sense, you're probably just gonna get frustrated. You're probably just gonna like that part of you even less, cause you to reject it more, and just drive your patterns in deeper. So the idea is suspend the idea that things need to make logical sense, because they're just not fucking gonna. You have an emotional part of your mind and you have a logical part of your mind. They have completely different forces that govern them, but there can be integration between the two. There can be understanding between the two. And shadow integration is the gap between mind and body. It's the gap between masculine and feminine. It's the bridge between logic and emotion. It's the integrative force between these two seemingly opposing ideas and forces in our minds and in our psyches, but they can come together by understanding that it's like the logical mind can wrap its head around the internal logic of the emotion. And the emotion gets taken care of by the practical element of the logical mind. There is a cohesive, collaborative element in here where they both get to be what they are and mutually benefit the other, but you can't be expecting one to be the other. You can't expect logic to behave like emotions, and you can't expect emotions to behave like logic. They are different, they're supposed to be different, they serve different purposes, and you have to embrace each individually and collectively in order to create the kind of harmony where you can have your logic and emotions get along, lead to long-term sustainable integration, and just be the kind of person that can solve these kind of problems on a fundamental level for the rest of your life. So let me know if you have any questions about this. Like I said, I'm gonna have more courses coming out that'll explain exactly how to do all this in great fucking detail, so stay tuned for that. I already have 2 out. Should be links in the comment section or the description to be able to get into those. And let me know if you have any more questions about this, because I know it's dense, I know it's complicated, I know there's a lot to talk about, and I wanna make sure that you're armed to take complete control of your life. So let me know how I can help. I love you, I'm Chris Orozco, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you've been enjoying this and any of my other content, then I have an exciting announcement for you. I've started releasing a series of online courses that can teach you my entire shadow integration protocol. So if you've been wanting to know what shadow integration actually is, I have a course for that. It's only like $5, and it'll outline everything that shadow integration is, why it's important, what will happen if you don't practice it, and ultimately what this practice can bring into your life. And then I also have the first course past that that's been released about vision creation. Vision creation is the first thing that I teach all of my clients. It's the first thing I teach in retreats and all of my online courses. Vision creation is the foundation of shadow integration. It's what shows you what you're aiming towards. It helps you connect to the part of yourself that everything gets integrated into. It makes your life meaningful, and it creates something that is strong and powerful and motivating enough for you to actually face all your fears to get to the other side of. So if you want to learn what shadow integration is, if you want to learn how to create a vision for yourself and not have your shadow get in the way, check out the link. There's going to be one in the description, and it will show you everything you need to know. I'm gonna keep them cheap, and then next I will be creating the identity creation course, and then finally after that I'll be creating the whole course on how to actually master shadow integration. So if you look at all these, if you take all these in, you will know everything I know about shadow integration. The link's gonna be below. I hope you enjoy it. I love you. I'll see you next time.